Welcome back, class. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to jump right in here, and hopefully this will be a quick video this week. We're in week 9, part 1. This is the last week before summer break. We're going to be doing basic operations, but now we're using rational numbers and mixed numbers, so fractions, decimals, that type of thing. So let's jump right in, and let's kind of go through. I think I have 8 problems picked out, and we'll kind of walk through them. So let's jump right into the iPad here. All right, so what you're looking at here is our first problem. It's adding 2 mixed numbers together. Now remember, mixed numbers are a whole number and a fraction that goes behind it. Now it could be written as a decimal, like for instance this ooh, my pen is working here. This 2 3/4 here. This can be written as 2.75. So you could change them to decimals. Now again, how you do that, you just take the 3 divided by 4 on a calculator, and you can write that as a decimal. It's 0.75. So it's 2.75. Now you don't have to do that. So I'm going to just show you how you can add these by just the fractions. So 2, so we have 2 3/4. We're going to add that to 1 5/8. Now the trick for doing this is that when you add and technically subtract, you can change these so you can like rearrange them. So what I mean by that is you group up the 2 and the 1 together, and then you're going to group up the 3/4 and the 5/8 together. Now you can do that technically on subtraction if the front fraction is bigger than the back fraction. So that's something you could do. But in this case, for adding, it doesn't matter. You can always do it. So 2 plus 1, that's 3. And then for the fractions in the back, you have to get common denominators. That's what you have to do when you add and subtract. So I want to make the bottoms both 8s. You can make them, 24s. You can make them 32s. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to make them both 8s on the bottom. So making this an 8. This 5/8 can stay where it's at. It already has an 8 on the bottom. But on that first fraction, the 3/4, I multiplied the bottom by 2. And so I'm going to multiply the top by 2 and get 6. That, again, how you change fractions, you multiply the top and bottom by the same number. So now that they have the same denominator, you can add those together to get 11/8. Because again, when you add fractions together, you add just the numerator, the top number. And so this is what you get. Now, I know we can't leave it like this because the top number is too big. It's an improper fraction, right? The top number is bigger than the bottom. So what you do is you figure out how many 8s can go into 11. Well, 1 8 can go into an 11, and you'd have 3 left over, because 11 minus 8 would be 3. So 11/8 would be the same as 1 3/8. It's 1 full pan plus 3 extra. That's how I think of it. Like if the pans can hold 8 brownies, you had 11 on that pan, so there was a couple extras on the top. You could take away 1 full pan and have 3 extras left over, and then you're going to add that to the 3 that was out front. So this ends up being 4 3/8. So that's your answer. That's what we're looking for. So that's their first one out of the 8. Let's go to our second problem now. Now we're going to be multiplying. Mixed numbers here. So 2 1/8, and we're going to multiply it by 1 7/9. Now, when you multiply or divide mixed numbers, you have to change these to improper. You can't just like group like we did earlier. This is multiplication. So what we have to do is we have to change these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the big number times the bottom and add the top to make this improper. So again, 2 times the 8, which is 16, and add the 1, I get 17/8. That's the idea. Again, 2 times the bottom, add the top. That's what you're doing. And on this one in the back, 1 times the bottom, add the top. So 1 times 9 is 9. Add the 7, you get 16/9. Again, the bottom number stays the same. And now I can multiply these 2 fractions together. Now when you do this, you can simplify up and down, diagonally, that type of thing. So like, for instance, the 17 and 8 don't have anything in common. The 16 and 9 don't have anything in common. But I can divide these by 8s. That's what you can do when you multiply. That was something we did last week. So if I do this, this will end up being a 2, and this will be a 1 if I divide them both by 8. And now I can go straight across. So 17 times 2, that's 34. And 9 times 1, that would be 9. So it's 34/9. Now that's technically the right answer. That would be the exact answer. But if you want to make this back to like a mixed number, you take figure out how many times 9 can go into 34. Well, 9 can go into 34, what, 3 times without going over? That would be 27. 9 could happen 27 times. 3 times, but it'd be adding up to 27. So that would be a difference of 7/9. Because you subtract 9, 7, or 3 times, and you'd be left with 7 left over after you did that. All right. Yeah, so this is the final answer. 34/9 is the same as 3 7/9 as a decimal. It's the same thing. But that's the second problem out of our 8. Let's go to our third problem. Okay, third problem, we're going to be adding here. So we're going to be adding 2 again, so 3 4/9. And we're going to be adding 2 5/6. Now again, you could change these to decimals, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to make these fractions. Now, since we're adding, we do have to get common denominators. So 6 and 9, they could go into 18s. Make them both 18s. I could make the 6 and 9 on the bottoms into, let's see, they both don't go into 24. I can make them 54s. Yeah, so there's not a lot. They can both go into 36s. You can make them kind of, there's a bunch, I guess, a bunch of different numbers, but I'm going to go with 18s. Let's make them both 18. So I'm going to multiply this first one, I'm going to multiply the bottom by 2. So I get 18, multiply the top by 2, I get 8. So that's changing that first fraction, multiplying the top and bottom by 2. On the second fraction, I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 3. Multiply the top and bottom by 3. So I get 18 on the bottom, and I get a 15 on the top. Again, you can choose different numbers, but you want to make the fractions the same numbers on the bottom. So my plan was to make them both 18s on the bottom, so I had to multiply the fractions by different numbers to get them to be both 18s, but it still works out. What we have here is we have, if we keep adding these together, we're going to get 5, because you add the whole numbers together, the 3 and the 2. And if I add the fractions together, 8 plus 15, let's see, what is that, 20... 23 over 18. That's 8 plus 15. So as you can tell, we have a mix. We have an improper fraction now. 18 can go into 23 once, and that would be what? What would that be? 6. That would be 6 on the top. 18 can go in there. 18 can go into 23 once, and there's a difference of 6 there. Or 5. No, there'd be a difference of 5. Okay, and my head. All right. And so I'm going to add these together, and so I get 6 and 5/18. Okay, so again, the big thing here is just kind of knowing the strategy. So when you add, you have to get common denominators. You can add straight across. When you multiply, you just make them improper and just multiply straight across, or simplify when you multiply. But that's what our third problem here. Let's go to our fourth problem out of the 8 that we have. We're multiplying again, so we have 2.5, and we're going to multiply by 1 3/5. All right, so we have to change these to improper. So again, how we do that is you multiply the top number by the bottom, add the top. So 2 times 2 is 4, plus the 1 is 5 over 2. So again, big number times the bottom, the denominator, and add the numerator, the top number, and then just put over whatever the bottom number is. And then in the second fraction, 1 times the 5, add the top, so 1 times 5 is 5. Adding the numerator, I get 8 over 5. Again, multiply by the bottom, add the top. And now, I can multiply straight across, but I'm going to simplify here. I can do a lot of simplifying. What I mean by that, like I can divide these both by 5s to get 1 and 1. I could divide the 2 and 8 by 2s, so I get 1 and 4. And if I multiply straight across, I get 4 over 1, which is just the same as the number 4. 4 divided by 1 is 4. So it's a nice whole number. That's kind of nice. Sorry, apologies. Let's go to our next one. So we're multiplying again. We have a mixed number, 2 3/4. I'm going to multiply by 3, so it's 3 over 1. So I'm going to make that an improper fraction. So take the 2 times the bottom, add the top. So I'm going to get 8. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus the top is 11 over 4. And then we're going to multiply by 3 over 1. And I can't simplify anything diagonally, so I'm just going to multiply straight across. So I get 33 over 4. That's just multiplying. Now, again, that's an improper fraction, so I figure out how many times 4 can go into 32. It can go in there perfectly 8, not perfectly, but it can go in there 8 times. 4 times 8 is 32, so I got really close. I was off by 1 over 4. So 8 1/4. Again, so 33 divided by 4 should be 8.25, and that's the same as 8 1/4. Okay, so I'm getting messages of that. All right, the next part here, we have to multiply fractions again. So 3 2/3, and I'm going to multiply by 2 7/10. So I need to make these improper. So let's change up the color here. So changing these improper, since we're multiplying 3 times the bottom, add the top. So 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11/3. And then 2 times the 10, add the top. So I get 20 plus 7 is 27 over 10. And now I can try to simplify. This the simplifying parts, you look diagonally or up and down. Currently, like diagonally, the 3 and the 27 can simplify to be 1 and 9, dividing them both by 3. The 11 and the 10 can't simplify. I can't go up and down any, so I'm just going to go straight across. So we get 99 over 10. That's then 11 times the 9 and the 1 times 10. And so 10 can go into 99 9 times without going over. And then that'll be up to 90, so I'll be off by 9 out of 10. So I'll be off by 9. So it was close. It was almost a perfect whole number. Okay, we have 2 problems left here. So the next one, we're subtracting. We're taking 1 9/10 from 4 3/5. So 4 3/5 is our big number, and we're going to subtract 1 9/10 from it. I know that we had to switch it around. The word from, you have to switch it around. So I'm taking something from something. So it makes sense the big number's in the front. Now, since we're adding and subtracting, you do have to make common denominators here. So if I make common denominators, I'm going to make the denominators 10, so I multiply this by 2, take the top times 2, I get 6, and 1 9/10. So this is what I was talking about earlier. When you subtract, you could group. I could group the 1 and the 4, I could group the 6/10 and 9/10, but the first fraction has to be bigger than the second fraction. And technically, when you look at this, they're not. This 6/10 is a smaller fraction than 9/10. So I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow. I know this seems kind of odd. This is a technique you can use for fractions. I'm going to borrow from the 4, making it a 3, and then I'm going to add a perfect 10 out of 10 to that fraction behind it. So this is 16 over 10. Because I took out 1 out of the 4, and that's a perfect 10 over 10. And so I added the 10 over 10 to the 6/10. That way, the fraction is technically bigger than the back one, the 9/10. So now I can actually subtract these. It's a little strategy you can do. It's called borrowing when you have fractions. You borrow from the whole number and make the fraction behind it just the perfect denominator larger. So that's what I did. And now I can subtract, and I can subtract in order. 3 minus 1 ends up being 2. And then the 16 minus 9 is 7/10. That's how you do it. Let's move on to the next one. We're adding, so 2 8/9, and we're going to add 3 2/3. Now I do need to make common denominators here because you are adding, just like I did earlier. So I'm going to change this second fraction. I'm going to make the multiply the top and bottom by 3, so I get 9 and 6 because I multiplied the top and bottom. The reason why is I want to get the 9s on the bottom of the fraction so I can actually add them. So if I add the whole numbers, I get 5. If I add the 2 fractions, I get 14/9, because again, when you add fractions, you just add the top numbers. So it's an improper fraction. The fraction has a larger number on the top. So how many 9s can go into 14? Well, 1 9 can go into a 14, and that would leave me with what? 5 left over? Oop. The bottom number was a 9. So if I took away 9 from the top, I'd have 5 left over. And if I add these together, I get 6 5/9. Okay, that was it. Again, thank you for all those who are actively participating each week. Always really appreciate it. This is our last week, so we only have a couple more activities to go. I know that the school's been sending out emails about turning in, late fees and all that good stuff. We have checkouts coming up at the end of this week and next week. So keep that in mind. You know, if you're doing work for me, all late work is due by tomorrow, so keep that in mind. If you're trying to, you know, redo assignments or make changes and stuff. But again, thank you for everything that you're doing. Hopefully you're staying safe, staying healthy, you're taking care of each other, and I hope to see you real soon.